All right, so today we are pleased to have Taylor Ogan joining us from Snowball Capital. Taylor, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I think maybe a lot of the viewers may be kind of familiar with you from your presence on, Tesla Twitter. I think you've been probably a lot of people have a perception of you as like a Tesla critic, and I think that's fair to a point. But I think there's a lot more nuance that you have in your views. So hopefully we can give you a chance to kind of expound on some of that. But maybe before we get into any specifics, could you give a just kind of overview of what Snowball is and kind of your role there and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. So Snowball Capital is a long biased hedge fund. We invest in the green tech, clean tech, high tech, and new tech space. So companies that are truly bettering people's lives. So artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, batteries, ed tech, personalized medicine, 5G technologies that all these are tech companies that we invest in, but technologies that really are improving people's lives. Not like maybe ExxonMobil, says that they're going to put solar panels on two of their oil rigs. Companies that really that's their mission, core to them. And so we're based in Boston, and we a lot of people think, at least in terms of my presence on Twitter, is that it is very critical of Tesla. I've followed Tesla since, I've been investing in it since its IPO. I camped outside of the second ever showroom opening. I've
Wow.
owned four of their vehicles. So I've followed this company for a very long time and waited for this rocket ship really to take off. And now I think that the valuation is I'm sure we'll talk about this today, but I think that the valuation is very high, and I think that there are other opportunities that people aren't really talking about. And so that's
Mhm.
really my voice on Twitter is kind of, it seems very Tesla heavy because we try to tweet about other things, but no one really cares. No one really wants to talk about telemedicine. No one really wants to talk about personalized medicine as much as they do Tesla, and they don't really want to talk about the other EV companies. So I see a lot of obviously great qualities to Tesla, which is why I've held the stock and currently do hold it. But I'm just not as excited about the potential that the stock has as I was 2 years ago. So some people may see that as being overly critical. I think that it's just important to see that when it kind of comes time to move your money elsewhere, it's important to hear both sides. So that's kind of my goal on Twitter, and that's again, I don't every single day. I don't just focus on Tesla in my actual day to day. It's just what people want to hear about. So yeah, I'm always happy to comment on my take, and sometimes I seem to have a bit of a different take as a bull than some of the others. But certainly, I'm not part of any conspiracy theory or bankruptcy club, which I think that the bulls need to be better at really
Yeah.
accepting criticism and not just labeling it as Tesla Q.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was gonna say, yeah, you're clearly not Tesla Q, but I think you get that label thrown around on you,
Yeah,
pretty frequently. I
Yeah,
had
in fact, me and you, Matt, we get that table almost thrown on us from certain hyper bull Tesla people just because we say, hey, the stock might not go to 1,000 plus anytime soon. People are like, poo-pooing on us for that already on Twitter. I see there's some crazies out there.
yeah, it's like, oh, we
yeah,
think it's possible Tesla could be range bound for the next couple of years. And like, oh no, you're crazy. It's gonna,
You're
20x
nuts.
every year forever. It's like,
Some guy was like, he's got like 10,000 Twitter followers. He threw out like, oh, gross margins are going to be 50% plus soon. And like, whoa, what?
what?
I don't know. Yeah, I just saw a tweet before. I was like, what the heck? So I don't know. There's some crazy people out there. I'll tell you that. I hope they don't put their money where their mouth is too much, or they might lose a lot of it pretty quickly. But who knows? Maybe if they're
and I
right, we
think
all
that
make money.
that's unhealthy for the brand to be just
Yeah.
unhealthily obsessed with Tesla and just saying that it's going to be a $100 trillion company in 5 years. I mean, you
Yeah.
that really does hurt
It
the
does.
people who are very serious about this.
Yeah. It makes us all
Um,
seem crazy. Yeah.
yeah, and it's the same kind of people who come out with like delivery estimates, and it's just a complete guess, or they don't actually build it from the ground up. They just kind of throw it around, and while their voice is kind of in the mix, it's not. There's some clear separation from people who do this for a living, versus people who do this when they get home from work and they just hop on Twitter and see, what some of the estimates are, for example. Or so yeah, I mean, if you really do this as your full-time job, I would say that the bulls and the bears, the extremes of both, are quite ridiculous. Because but the bulls can hurt the brand just as much as the bears.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I think your point about there being, I think, different levels of kind of informed opinions out there is certainly true. I think we've all seen people who say like, okay, what are your delivery expectations? And they do a poll as if that's like a reasonable estimate of establishing, delivery estimates. In reality, it's just, kind of people's wish list. Like, what do you wish Tesla's deliveries will be?
Right.
So if you're building a model or making delivery estimates and God forbid, even investing in kind of short-term either call options or short kind of in and out stock plays based on kind of your feel or your wishes of what you hope might happen. I think that's hurtful for your investments and just not helpful for the discourse generally. So we do try to be, I think, reasonable, Emmet and I, and have appreciate thoughtful criticism of the company. And we're not shy from pointing out maybe uncomfortable truths about the company either. So maybe that's a helpful overview. I know one of the things that Snowball has been very interested in, and you guys, I think, have a pretty unique view, I would say, is kind of the market in China. So what could you give a little background? How did you guys get interested in China, and what are you seeing there now there in the EV space and in the tech space more generally?
Yeah. So as all the our investment theme that I laid out earlier, if you look at the winners in each of those respective themes, the leading companies are almost always Chinese. And so we didn't set out to really invest most of our holdings in China. It just happens to be that way. And so much so that we're actually moving our entire company to China within the year. And Matt, I know that Matt's fluent in Mandarin, which is very impressive, and studied that.
That's not true. It used to be somewhat fluent, but that was about 10, 15 years ago. It's most of it's gone, so I don't speak so well anymore. But
I mean, it's a great language to know, and I'm still taking Mandarin lessons every week. I'm sure I'll get a lot better when we actually live there. But the Chinese market's really interesting because they have, in many ways, a supportive government, especially with the hard tech. Not so much with the soft tech right now; it's kind of rebalancing. But with the hardcore companies, that's batteries, that's chip manufacturing, that's anything that you actually produce something of, versus a soft core, which would be like Tencent, even Alibaba, JD. It seems that they're setting up, the government is currently setting up kind of a regulatory framework by which everyone will soon abide. And then after that, I think they'll be very laissez-faire. And so you have a supportive government, which the United States, I mean, geez, just a few days ago, Congress people were asking what if Instagram can take down Finstagram, and they just don't understand. I mean, there's so many things where our politicians don't understand it. So it really starts at the top and moves its way down in terms of favorability of the climate for these companies to play. So it's a lot of these companies are Chinese. If you look at, for example, autonomy, the leading companies right now it's really a mixed bag of about 5 Chinese and 5 American companies with actual robo-taxis where there's no driver being tested, and they're all actually almost all of them are being tested in California as well. But they're leading in that. They're leading in 5G. I mean, I have a 5G phone. It's not actual 5G unless I'm in maybe a few sports stadiums or a few city blocks. But Americans think that we have 5G, right? In China, South Korea, Japan, they actually have 5G everywhere. That big metropolises. So
yeah, like reception in like subways is ridiculous. Like it's kind of crazy, like how far advanced in China and Korea, like you said. Like it truly is, I think, a lot more tech savvy than maybe a lot of people outside of those countries really realize that it is.
Right.
So when you talk about these Chinese companies leading all these spaces, how would you define that? So like leading, and I think maybe like on the autonomy side, I think maybe your average Tesla bull just assumes Tesla is leading in autonomy, but I think you're making a distinction, right? That right now it's an ADAS system. It could potentially develop into the point where it is autonomy.
Right.
But if we're using autonomy, in the literal sense of it, then right now Tesla is not an autonomous vehicle, providing company. But there are,
Right.
others like Waymo and a lot of Chinese companies that are actually providing products that do that right now. So in what other areas are you seeing those Chinese companies leading in, areas where your average U.S. consumer might think that Silicon Valley is in the lead?
Yeah. Well, first of all, for autonomy, it's very easy. It's just simply disengagements per mile or per given period of time. So that's actually a very numerical way. There are other ways that are more difficult to really gauge who really are the winners. But when you take a step back and really look at the space, for example, like telemedicine, we have the top telemedicine company in the U.S. is Teladoc,
Yeah.
and the stock had a nice rise during COVID, and now it's falling back. But in China, I mean, they have Alibaba Health, JD Health. That these are companies, they have the entire ecosystem. I mean, they're incredible, where they don't just book your actual stays in the hospital, your visits to the hospital, but they also you see a doctor before, so they can properly diagnose you. You don't have to wait in line. That's a big issue in China. And then they actually have follow-up and they also have your entire medical record digitized. You can't even get your medical record sent from your orthodontist to your dentist in America, right? So it's very difficult if you can. So they really have a lot of it is because it's so data heavy. It's such and also definitely a part of this is cultural, where you have Chinese people who are typically a lot more willing to share their data than in the West, where we are very protective of our data, and that is really how quickly a lot of these companies can grow. And so it's really a ceiling in the West, I'd say. But in other spaces, I mean, automated manufacturing is one that you may not see in your everyday life. But even look at Tesla's factory in Shanghai. I mean, look at the flyovers of that thing versus Fremont. The Fremont looks like a dump, literally. I mean, there's scrap metal everywhere. But and look at the efficiency at Gigafactory 3 in Shanghai. That thing is I mean, in China, it's just a mentality where they would rather have robots that don't sleep. They don't even need the lights on. They don't need to, have a union or anything. They are manufacturing these products and they don't make mistakes. They're incredibly accurate, and they would rather have higher rates of automation. Whereas you look at Tesla's rate of automation, at least at Fremont, on GA1 and GA2, and the rate of automation has gone down every single year. They want more people on there because the robots either aren't trained well enough or because they just think it's faster. But in China, they don't want that. And then also America specifically has an obsession with creating jobs and maintaining jobs. Whereas the Chinese, they'd rather just have robots build these things and have those displaced people work elsewhere. So it really is kind of a mentality, both from the government and culturally. And that's another space that we see a lot of these companies really thrive in China, especially when you compare them to what we have in the West.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people are looking at some of the actions of the CCP lately. The kind of crackdown on billionaires and some of the restrictions on gaming and other kind of crackdown, it seems, on tech. And people, I've heard a lot of influential investors kind of talking about China potentially being uninvestable, or at least maybe having the consideration that there's maybe some policy uncertainty that would require some sort of risk premium to invest there. Seems like your view is much different on that, and you kind of view it as a supportive policy. Can you maybe expand on what you're seeing that makes you comfortable from someone who's putting capital to work there in mainland China? How do you kind of get comfort where the rest of us are maybe seeing signs of caution?
Well, I certainly see some distress in the market there. in particular names and industries. So again, I think the first thing to do is to separate from soft tech versus hard tech. And really, when you look at what the government needs, let's say that China's putting on the World Fair, and they want to show off their best technology. What are they going to show off? They're not really going to have Tencent there. They're not. Maybe they'll have Didi, provide some transportation, but like, what's actually on the ground there? They have their electric buses that they produce more than anyone. They produce most of the world's photovoltaics. They have the chips. They have these types of batteries. I mean, last year, 99.8% of the batteries in the entire world used in electric vehicles came from Asian companies. There's no mistake. That's why the United States is trying to catch up so badly, and Europe is too. But you have this government that understands what tech really they want to push, and the rest of it, again, I think that this is really a temporary thing, and it's actually very good as we kind of rebalance everything and see, all right, what are these? Are people playing too many video games? All right, then you kind of back away from companies like Tencent, maybe where almost 50% of its revenue comes from gaming alone. So you have that there are definitely that's a quick and easy way to really start, and then you have to start looking at some of the names in particular and the ways they're set up, because there's a lot of people don't know about the ADRs. They don't know about over the counter, trading over the counter. People are very foreign to this, and so that's why they've kind of held on to just BABA, traded on New York Stock Exchange. Well, they're really, I mean, that is theoretically, I mean, it's a VIE, right? So you're owning that through the Cayman Islands. Anytime you see holdings at the end of the name, and a lot of these Chinese names are very long, but if you see holdings, that means that you don't actually own that company, right? It's through kind of a shell company in the Cayman Islands, and so that's why I'm not saying, obviously none of this is investment advice, but if you want to own Alibaba, maybe the safer way to hold it is they just had a secondary listing on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in Hong Kong. You can buy that. Now it's, it trades in, lots of, I think 500 for that one. And you obviously need to buy Hong Kong dollars first to buy that. But that's probably, if the Chinese government or the US government is going to crack down on these VIEs, then you're pretty safe if you want to own that same name, in holding it in Hong Kong rather than here. So those types of risks you have to be very mindful of. And so I'm not saying that China overall is investable or not investable, but very specific areas you should stay away from. Like, I mean, ed tech, all these, New Oriental, Tall, OneSmart. That was really sad to see because, and unfortunately, we got out of it before really all this hit the fan. But I mean, we rode some of that down, very, very little, but just because we're like, it can't go any further. And then the government just really keeps on pounding into it. And now that's one exception, I'd say, that's just the government going after them. Didi also is pretty unusual in how the government really went after Didi. And I don't think it's one of these, they're trying to go after, monopolists, because they have pretty near monopolists. And they seem absolutely fine with them. And so I don't know if it's necessarily a crackdown on billionaires. I think if you're going to be a billionaire, you got to be a quiet billionaire in China. And Jack Ma, for example, is maybe flaunting a little too much, but they have a lot of them, right? I mean, I think China mints a new billionaire every 5 times faster than the United States. And also something that really is important is the role of women in executive positions. I mean, half the world are women, and in China, and Matt, I don't know if you saw a lot of this in China, but and a lot of this I think probably came from the one-child policy. But women hold 44% of, this is a 2018 number, but 44% of executive positions in China. Wow. Whereas the US, I think it's like 17%. We're one of the lowest. So the role of really just equality in terms of gender at the workplace, they take advantage of it in a much more efficient way. They're just better at it. So all of these types of things, again, it comes back to some of it's cultural, which is why understanding Chinese culture is really important. But it's also, they just have a huge market, There's 1.3 billion people and of course they're going to sell more, and they're going to have more monthly active users. I mean, if you take like I don't know, Instagram's monthly active users, and you compare it to some of these Chinese companies, they're dwarfed. Instagram's dwarfed by them, and people in the West probably haven't even heard of a lot of these. So
Right, yeah.
the scale is just enormous, which is why, yeah, a huge focus is on China, even in the EV space, which we can get into. But that's China's really cool.
One quick question on that is, you mentioned, how the Chinese government really is focused on hard tech versus soft tech, and Tesla, is trying to bring new hard tech or innovate a lot, obviously, and so they kind of like, I think, Tesla being there to some degree, but on the other hand, they probably want to favor XPeng or NIO or BYD or other Chinese native companies to some degree too. I mean, what's your thoughts on the future of Tesla and China? What do you think?
Yeah, well, keep in mind, Tesla actually wanted the GF3 was supposed to be just for China. And they even talked about opening a second Chinese factory because the demand would be so high. Well, demand is very high. It's just not nearly what people expected. And really, that's kind of Tesla's fault. They really are selling only 2 models, and one of them's like 4 years old, and the other one's 2 years old. Whereas these other companies, they're coming out, with 8 models in one company in this year. So there are a lot more options. The thing that Tesla still has is the brand value, and that's tremendous. I mean, Matt, you probably especially know this. Brand value really carries a lot in China, and especially China is this car obsessed culture, and where the car is everything. It's a status symbol. I mean, yeah. Do you have any opinions on that or observations that you noticed?
It's funny actually. I was in China in the 90s, and I actually toured. GM had a joint facility, a JV there. I forget which city it was. It might have been Shanghai, but I don't remember. I mean, this was over 20 years ago. I'd have to look it up, but we were talking to the people there, and they were saying Buick, which at the time and probably still today is not a very well-regarded brand here in the United States. Right. But apparently, back during the kind of Western colonial times, all the Westerners would be driven around in Buicks, and so there was kind of the status symbol that having a Buick was kind of like an upmarket luxury vehicle. So I remember for a long time, the Buick brand did incredibly well in China, kind of for that reason. I think since then, they probably haven't kept up with innovation the way, a lot of other brands have. So it appears, I haven't been tracking it super closely, but it appears, the Buick brand has lost a lot of its luster in the last 20, 30 years. But yeah, there certainly is that very high degree of brand loyalty. And you've seen that like with a lot of the luxury names as well, Dior and a lot of like the high-end kind of fashion names. Their biggest market is in China now, and Chinese consumers are incredibly discerning on quality. So it certainly is something that is very highly regarded within China, probably even more so than in the United States.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's probably triple. I mean, it's your identity, and so that just Emmet, to answer your question, I think that because Tesla's brand is so powerful, I think that Tesla is relatively safe in China as they stand now. And I think they only have, I mean, I do think that their sales will peak if they just still have Model 3 and Model Y. They really need a China specific brand. I think they need at least 4. But let's start with 1. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be a $25,000 model. They have a bunch of people in the middle class. And a lot of these other imported cars, once you pay the luxury tax and the import tariffs and everything, it's like a Model S in China. The base Model S is like $200,000 US. So but people are still buying them. So definitely there are enough people who could buy them. And right now, a lot of those are finding other EV companies whose sales are growing really fast. But Tesla, so I think that they will be fine. And as they introduce more models, they'll find a lot more prosperity in China. But it is not as great as once envisioned. So in terms of how the government feels about Tesla in China, is I think I think they like them right now. And I think that they'll continue to like them. And the big real test of this was when just really last 2 quarters, when Tesla China has been exporting cars. So cars
Yeah.
obviously that are made in Shanghai, and then
They love
they're
that, I
shipped to
bet.
Europe and Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they actually they love it. But there was certainly some concern that maybe they won't like that. Maybe they just want these cars for China. And they've given them very favorable, interest rates and tax incentives, and all the land to build there and to expand even. But yeah, I think that, and it's also a very efficient factory, employing quite a lot of smart people. It's not really that conveniently located. I don't know if you've seen it on the map, Matt, but it's really south of Shanghai.
Yeah, it is.
Which,
And Shanghai's like a gigantic city. I mean, it takes
yeah,
hours to like traverse across it anyways. And it's,
right.
way on the outskirts of just this kind of incredible metropolis. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fair point that it's not super centrally located.
No,
I'm
but it's
curious.
just fantastic factory. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is, and it continues to expand at a pretty impressive rate. But I'm curious, what's your take on the fact that Tesla was able to get 100% ownership? I mean, it seems that was honestly at the time, and even now remains really surprising to me that Tesla was able to retain full ownership when every other manufacturer I'm aware of has a 50% JV with a local entity. What's your take on that?
I think that's just another example of how I really think the Chinese government's trying to light a fire under all the other asses of these EV startups. And they're trying to say, look, if you want to compete against Tesla, you got to compete just purely without our help. And maybe we'll help you a little bit, but we're not really going to help Tesla too much, and we're not going to slow them down too much either. So more EVs in China is better. They have goals. They have the 5-year plans. They need to have more electric vehicles. And I think whomever is going to help do that, they're going to embrace with open arms. So yeah, I think that really that is just to be very hands off and just say, go for it. And we want our other companies to really catch up. You set the rhythm. And that really seems to be happening even from day one of that factory breaking ground.
And so to contrast that with ed tech, I mean, it's a favored space where the government sees it as a national priority to have, high penetration of EVs, that production capability, but also a high penetration within the market there locally. And so if you are operating in one of those favored spaces, then the government's at least not going to be antagonistic towards you. Is that a fair kind of assessment?
Very fair. Yeah, perfect.
And so how do you think that market's going to shake out more broadly? I mean, obviously, I think we all kind of expect, greater EV penetration, especially in China. But do you think there will be some domestic names within China that will be more successful in, kind of having a brand presence outside of China, potentially in Europe and the United States and Western countries, as opposed to, maybe just other Asian countries?
Yeah, it's definitely a big unknown right now for everyone. I mean, for consumers in Europe, mostly. Australia is definitely a huge market, in New Zealand. America is just so anti-China right now that I don't think any of them should really step foot here. But I think, if you think about it, you don't actually know what you think of Chinese cars, right? We've never had Chinese cars for sale here, really. So it's they're kind of coming at it with a clean slate, and Europeans tend to be more open with these vehicles in the early batches that we're seeing, Xiaopeng, BYD, NIO, Li Auto. That as they start really just testing the waters in Europe, so far they're very popular, and we're only talking about a few hundred units. I mean, nothing crazy, scaling up to a few thousand, but I think everyone needs to just wait this out and try to see, all right, are these cars just better than something else I could buy for that same price point? What is it that obviously they need to be the best at that price point? But really they haven't made a European or an Australian focused vehicle. These are just cars that were built for the Chinese market. I mean, look at NIO, for example. In their vehicles, you have the little robot, face thing, and that, Nomi, it would be super weird in the United States, if you had this little like thing sticking out, like with like giant hands and big eyes, like talking to you as you drive. But in China, they love that. So that's like a car built for the Chinese market. Even the styling is very Chinese. So they may find that they need to tinker with this a little bit. Or maybe people will just accept that stuff. They'll be like, all right, cool. I have a voice assistant that has eyes staring at me. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't think that there's going to be just one winner. It's either they all fail. If one fails, they all fail, and for a very long time. I mean, they blow it for everyone else, or they all quietly start doing very well. And I think it's the latter. I hope it's the latter, just for the sake of the environment. But yeah, I still think overall the focus is on China for all these car companies, and the only reason that they may expand to maybe they even sell 100 in the United States, it's just to further validate that the West likes this product, therefore the Chinese will buy this a lot more, and that's true of a lot of brands. It's a little trick they do. So I think that maybe that's what we are seeing. Actually, they have no intentions of really delivering 100,000 units in Europe a year. I think it may just be a test on many fronts.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm curious though, why do you think, if one of them, I mean, say, just picking one, Neo doesn't make it for whatever reason, why do you think that would drag down the broader market? My sense, and I'm not looking at China nearly as closely as you are, but is that, the EV tide is rising kind of across the board, across the world. And some of these companies, my take is just won't be competitive, won't have the technology edge, won't be able to offer pricing that's competitive, and so some of them are less likely to survive. Why do you say it's kind of all or none in that regard?
Because it's just going to be that much more difficult to convince buyers if there's already this reputation that let's say vehicle fires. I mean, that would be a really bad one, because that's very easy to look at and say, whoa, poorly made Chinese product, it catches fire, I don't want that thing in my home. We're already seeing that with electric scooters. I mean, I just bought my second electric scooter because I live in Boston. I have a car, but like Boston is very hard to navigate. So it's way easier to navigate on an electric scooter. And I talk to people all the time, like in the elevator at work, and the first thing they say is, "Oh, that's cool. How fast does it go?" But don't those catch fire really easily? So already, it just takes a few for that kind of reputation to really engulf, no pun intended, the entire space. But so I think if it's something extreme like a series of battery fires, that would be really bad. But if they're just poorly made, same kind of thing, maybe on a lesser level. It's just then the other companies will have to really prove beyond what they can get away with, so to speak, in China. They really have to prove their product is very very high quality. So that's why I think they're all kind of looking at each other and it's like a standoff. But I hope that they seem to be doing it in a really strategic way and establishing these brands. I mean, some of these companies are even toying with and filing some of these logos and names of different brands. And where you have the Neo houses in China, if you're familiar, they just opened the first Neo house in Europe, and it's very popular. But do they need a separate one? And also some of these names just simply don't translate. People don't even know how to say, like Xiaopeng or something, or they don't really. So maybe they do need like a Western refresher. But yeah, I think that it will be very strategic as they move.
So if you had to pick one, I'm sure you have a Chinese based EV company that you like the most. Which one is it, and why that one versus the other Chinese EV companies?
Yeah, hands down BYD. BYD is a phenomenal company, and they're also more easily compared to Tesla, and especially as an investment. I printed out something that just for quick reference in terms of just the valuation right now. So BYD this year is going to sell probably about 580,000 new energy vehicles, and almost all 99% are going to be sold in China. Let's say Tesla sells, I don't know, 865,000. then next year, Tesla sells 1.2 million. BYD will probably sell 1.1 million. So they're very similar in terms of their deliveries. I mean, that's 90%, right, of it.
Yeah.
But the stock price right now, let's just talk about, by market cap. Right now, BYD is only 13% of what Tesla's market cap is currently.
Wow.
So Tesla's 7.5 times larger in terms of market cap, and they're doing very similar things. Yeah, it's just over 100 billion today. And so they're the only battery manufacturer in the world that makes cars, and they make their own semiconductors, the IGBT chip. And the battery in an electric car, those combined costs are about 40% of the cost of manufacturing that vehicle. So if they make both those in-house, they're the only company in the world that does that. Sure, Tesla's trying, at least on the battery front, but this company, it started out as a battery company in 1995. So they were the world's largest battery manufacturer for a very long time. But also, if you look at just 5 years ago, for example, Tesla was almost double BYD's market cap, and they were in this same space. But also, BYD makes photovoltaics. They make energy storage. They also make a lot of cell phone parts and everything. But Core is definitely, they're actually the world's largest mask manufacturer since last year, which a lot of people, you may have a BYD mask. But it was only
you guys had a really good thread on that, by the way. I think Bridget, who works with
my
you,
colleague
really
Bridget has a
good thread on that.
Yeah. And it's actually translated from a book, but that whole story is really interesting. But so they were similarly, valued 5 years ago. Then 4 years ago, still 2.3 times larger, 2.7 3 years ago. And then it just ballooned. Tesla just ballooned. Whereas, the deliveries, the rate of growth of deliveries was quite similar in the two companies. But now Tesla just is, at what? Today it's $780 billion. Yeah. Whereas Tesla just passed, or BYD just passed 100. So, but then if you really look at what's more likely is if Tesla were to grow by like 5x, that would put it at just under $4 trillion market cap. That's $4,000 a share. Yeah. Whereas BYD, 5 times from here, is only half of $1 trillion. It's still under what Tesla is. Now, let's say that BYD, where Tesla's market cap is right now, BYD only catches up to 50% of that. That would be $135 a share, whereas right now it's $30 a share. That's, I think, a lot more likely than for Tesla to grow another, that would be 4.4 times what it is right now. It's just, it's a lot. Yeah.
What's the BYD brand like? You talked about branding. I've hardly heard of it. I've heard it before, but in the US, it's almost unheard of. In China, is it like a strong brand that people really like, or is it sort of commoditized? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, well, it wasn't known for making electric vehicles for a very long time. It was just really just handset components and batteries. And then in the last really 8 years, they've been known for mostly making electric taxi cabs and electric buses. So for a while, the fleet of BYD electric taxi cabs in just the city of Shenzhen, which is where it's China's Silicon Valley, it's where a lot of these companies, including BYD, are headquartered. That fleet of every single taxi in the city was electrified, and now every bus is as well. And that's a massive city of 24 million people. Yeah. So that fleet was bigger than all of Europe's electric fleet of just any type of electric vehicle combined. So, the scale of just the taxis and buses and now commercial vehicles. You can look at Rivian. Rivian's just dipping their toes into this. BYD's been at this for a very long time. So yeah, it really does. It does it all. And they have, so the reputation right now, they're obsessed with safety, battery safety. They've never had a vehicle fire that came from the battery. Whereas Tesla had, I think we're at 6 this month. So, and that's one of the things that happens when you don't make your own battery, when you have to buy the cells from other companies. And we don't know what 4680 safety is going to be. It's kind of weird that Tesla hasn't mentioned that once, but we hope that it's going to be very safe. But already, that you have, so safety is paramount for BYD. That's what, Wang Chongfu, their CEO, drank battery fluid on stage like 5 years ago just to prove how safe it is. Safety, that's what their brand is synonymous with. But I wouldn't say, it's definitely not a luxury. Their most expensive car is like $45,000. So They don't make. They're going after really the lower market,
lower middle class.
Yeah, like a $10,000 electric car up to $25,000 electric car is really their kind of sweet spot, and they're selling extremely well. I mean, they just sold 51,000 vehicles, new energy vehicles last month in China, which just they're dwarfing Tesla. Granted, Tesla sells in other markets, so can't really compare
much
them.
Higher average sale price and such, probably different margin.
Right.
Yeah, and I would also push back a little bit on the battery. Like, I think the battery fires, whether it's with Tesla, at least it's sort of de minimis statistically. I mean, sure, it gets news headlines and maybe there's perception changes, but I think from a statistical point of view, the actual danger from battery fires with Tesla is so de minimis compared to any ICE cars. But it's really the crash testing safety that's the biggest factor of statistical safety, I think. And Tesla, to me, I think is the top in the US. I don't know BYD's crash test safety or how they do it in China, but I'm assuming you do. I mean, they must have okay crash test safety at least, right?
Yeah, BYD is the only electric vehicle manufacturer in the world that has its own crash test facility. So other companies actually pay to use their facility, and it's a beautiful facility. And I've actually watched them crash cars there. I think 4 or 5 cars. And over the course of a few hours, they just crash cars like crazy. So they are, because the thing is, they know that if they have one bad crash, it really, really ruins their brand in a lot of people's minds. And that's just how the Chinese are. They never really forget. But so that their vehicles are extremely safe. Inherently, electric vehicles are going to be safer, lower center of gravity. They have the battery really as kind of the chassis, and they have a huge crumple zone, of course. And Tesla is fantastic, obviously, safest cars in the world. But I would say I push back on the battery fires because I don't compare the battery fires to internal combustion engine vehicle fires. I actually compare them to other electric vehicle manufacturers, and Tesla is quite bad. And Tesla, there are others that are, GM has suffered a lot from this. So there are other bad battery fires from other manufacturers, and there are also just a lot of Teslas on the road. But no, I think it's unacceptable how many fires compared to companies that don't have any fires. Like it's 0 versus even 1 is too many. So, and the thermal runaway is the scariest for me. I don't want my Tesla to just blow up in the middle of the night, and unfortunately that happens sometimes. Now, I will say it seems to be with 18650 cells from Panasonic that are, so the Model S and X, they're proportionately much higher than vehicle fires than 3 and Y that are using 2170s. But still, some of the 2170s are not so great. But at least Panasonic's improving on that front, and it's also at the pack level. Tesla has some, they make the BMS and everything, the inverters, so they have some responsibility. But it does seem to be from the cells, so it's not entirely Tesla's fault, but it's their vehicle. So yeah.
I mean, but Tesla does have I think it has like 2 million vehicles on the road now, and so that's like many, many times more than any other non-Chinese EV maker for sure. And so I think of all the I don't know enough about the China market, Chinese EVs, but of all the non-China EVs out there, whether it's Volkswagen, BMW, all the legacy automakers in the US, like by far statistically, Tesla is superior in terms of how many battery fires they have per 100,000 cars versus those guys, which many of them don't even have 100,000 cars even delivered, but they have battery fires, so.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I can see, I understand the perception thing, but statistically, I just think it's still de minimis for you to talk about battery fires with Tesla. But yeah.
If you don't compare it to Chinese EVs, right?
I suppose. I just don't know enough about the Chinese EV. I mean, there could be battery fires in Chinese EV market that never come to light. I don't know what the freedom of press is like necessarily, but you guys know more about that than me. I'm not going to speculate.
Yeah, we've crunched the numbers, and Tesla is not great compared to the Chinese EVs, but compared to the rest of the space, really there aren't enough. I mean, you just have one, and there hasn't even been 10,000. So that rate you can't even calculate that. But compared to the larger Chinese EV companies, Tesla is quite poor in terms of battery safety. But again, yeah, sure. If at the end of the day you want to compare it to internal combustion engine vehicles, then they do seem to be safer, taken with a grain of salt, because those vehicles are much older. The average vehicle on the road is 11.2 years, whereas the average Tesla on the US road is 1.8 years old. So you can't really compare those that well. But I'm surprised the government hasn't really taken a bigger step. And really, if it is that big of a deal compared to ICE vehicles, then the government will step in, and they haven't. So it's probably fair to say that they are statistically better than internal combustion engine vehicles. But I'm just comparing them to the biggest EV market in the world.
Sure. Yeah, and like even just this week, NHTSA was looking at that petition to investigate Tesla vehicle fires, and I think I don't remember the exact wording that they came out with, but it was something to the effect of they don't see any kind of statistical significance, kind of indicating any sort of elevated risk. So it's I think it's not for lack of awareness that there could potentially be an issue there. I mean, everything that I've seen so far is showing that the Tesla vehicle fires are certainly well lower than their ICE counterparts, at least here in the United States. And maybe, you're right, it could be vehicle age, could be other things. Time will really only tell. But, as of right now, it seems that they're just generally, in whatever safety category you look at, Teslas do appear to be much safer. EVs in general appear to be much safer. Maybe not Chevy Bolts, but So, I want to, you're talking about BYD, having a pretty nice valuation, but they're like around $80 billion, I think right now, right?
100.
Oh, they're 100. Okay. So what do you think of some of these new SPACs coming out, or Rivian IPOing at like $80 billion?
That's it's going to probably trade on day one, similar to BYD. Yeah.
I know. And so that exactly, right? If they just come out of nowhere and now they have the same market cap as BYD. I mean, BYD has almost 250,000 employees. They have dozens of factories. Like that's so ridiculous. And I love Rivian, but like that valuation is just ridiculous. I mean, look at Lucid. Lucid's almost worse.
Yeah.
But I mean, actually, no, maybe Polestar is worse. But it's still 90. What? It's only 4% float. So I think that Rivian. I really like Rivian, and I really actually would love to own one of those vehicles. But and I've seen probably six Rivians in person, and they're phenomenal vehicles. But $80 billion, like that's you can't just come out of the gates like that,
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, I think even Lucid's at 40 or 50 billion or something, and I was thinking Polestar 20 billion. They're actually delivering hundreds of vehicles right now. They have like the Volvo affiliation. That's a little more reasonable. 20 billion versus 50 and 80 billion.
Right.
Seems more reasonable. But yeah, they're all kind of crazy. It's crazy valuations in these SPACs, and Rivian's not a SPAC; it's an IPO, so it's going to be propped up pretty well and probably trade initially a little higher than 80 billion, but it's crazy. I mean, I don't know if you go short much, but we're considering stuff to do short. I mean, they're probably going to be super expensive to borrow shares of Rivian when they come out, and will be super expensive. But at some point, it might make sense. I don't know. It just, it seems insane, that Rivian valuation.
It is insane.
I don't know who's buying the 80 billion of a valuation. I don't know what that's about.
That's a good question. Maybe, I think you get a bunch of hedge fund guys together. We're happy to kind of critique the valuation of these companies. But what do you think, just operationally, from the likes of like Polestar and Lucid and Rivian? My sense is they won't all make it, but probably some of them will, and will eat some share from the traditional OEMs. What is your kind of take on how that will just evolve if you set the valuations aside?
It's always the next Tesla killer, and I've always hated that because
the last 10 years that's been the narrative.
Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous. I mean, just give the reporters really need to drop that line. But no, I think that it's not the Tesla killer. These are going to be people who, let's say, like for Volvo, they have the Volvo XC90 and then just regular internal combustion engine. Then maybe they get the plug-in hybrid electric version, and then their next one maybe will be electric, which is actually why I think PHEVs are really, really, really important, especially in China where range anxiety runs rampant. It really eases a lot of people and gets them into the transition into a fully electric car, and that's a more difficult sell in the United States. Why Tesla continues to dominate in market share in the U.S. In the EV space is because of the charging network. That really is, because we're such a sprawling nation. China's not so sprawling. A lot of people live very close to the cities, if not in the cities, but they don't really have suburbs like we do. They don't really go on cross-country road trips like we do. I mean, I've taken my previous Tesla, coast to coast, and it was great. But I couldn't do that in really any other. I mean, Electrify America is pretty good now, but you can't really do that in a lot of electric vehicles still. So that's Tesla's real gem and selling point, on top of just brand in the United States, and performance and range, kind of everything. But I think these newer companies, I don't know if too many of them will fold. I mean, maybe like Bollinger and like Hyliion and some of these others, but Lordstown already failed. But I think that some of them, like Rivian's not going to fail for sure. It already has this deal from Amazon. They could just live off of that if they wanted to. 100,000 trucks, right? Or vans rather. You have Polestar. I mean, they're saying 290,000 by 2025. I mean, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And so maybe I like that valuation a little bit better when you compare it to like Rivian. But Rivian, they only have I think like 30,000 pre-orders. So not a ton compared to, granted, those are real pre-orders. You can't just like put $100 down and pre-order 8 Cybertrucks. But so they're probably
guilty.
That conversion rate is going to probably be higher. But no, actually it's like 40. I think it's 48,000. 48,000 just in their S1. But I don't really see them folding. I just think that it's because they also are comprised of a lot of former Tesla people. And that's the reason why they've been taking so long to really get going, is because, I mean, deliveries are probably going to start next week, if not this week. So they've been taking so long because these people were at Tesla when they were rolling things out that were not ready quite to be rolled out. They don't want to make that mistake again. So they want to make sure these are absolutely perfect. I mean, even Lucid, just last week when all these reporters got to see it, they still said it's not quite done. And I actually was in the very first Lucid that was not camouflaged, I think back in April. And it was the engineers literally told me it's 90% done. And I was like, 90%? I mean, that's good job, but still, that's 10% a lot. And there were like 3D printed parts and everything all over the car. So the panel gaps were atrocious. I mean, they make Tesla look like the best built car ever. But yeah, it was that car has been taking some time. But then they just got the EPA rating, and that's really good. And you can't fake that. So clearly their tech is good, and Rivian's tech is very good. I just think there may be more niche markets that they're going after. And so that's why I can't really justify even almost half of the valuation that, right now. So then if you back out all of what the comps are in the industry, if you don't compare it to Tesla, then it's just is still quite ridiculous. But overall, I don't think these companies will fail. At least the ones valued over 15 billion.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you've visited Lucid, obviously. Have you had a chance to see these other vehicles or talk to management with any of them?
Yep. Yeah, every single one. Polestar, by the way, I was not impressed. It was, I guess it was, the quality actually was really great, and that car is made in China. But the quality was really good, like very good. I did not like the way it drove. And I even tested, the performance version of it, and I have a performance Model Y, and so stiffer suspension and everything. And it was just everyone at my company who drove it, they did not like it. It does look kind of cool, but like so does the Volvo Recharge. That's one I haven't driven. I'll probably drive that next week. But no, I think that I've driven pretty much all of them except an e-tron. I don't really have much interest in test driving an e-tron yet. Maybe I will soon, but like all these Volkswagen vehicles are also like pretty terrible. Like the ID3, the ID4, those are. I mean, you feel the plastic on it, and it feels like you're in an airplane. Like what your tray table is made out of. That kind of like plasticky feel all over it. It doesn't drive. Oddly, it has really phenomenal turning radius, but I was like,
I don't think turning radius sells cars though.
Yeah, right. So no, I think a lot of these are not great. Rivian though and Lucid are very quality cars, and Tesla's going to need to step up its game on its highest end, Model S and Model X, to if they want to compete with these. And I think that in that space they will lose to some, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really make a dent for Tesla.
Yeah, it is pretty small on in the scheme of their kind of overall model mix, and they've got their sights set on lowering ASPs and getting to more mass market adoption. So that's clearly the end goal. But I mean, I know Emmet's got the new Plaid and loving that by
you do?
all accounts.
Yeah, I love it.
Wow.
Yeah, it drives fast. It's smooth.
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate luxury car, I feel like. And they fixed anything that you could have complained about with the Model S in the old days, I feel like is fixed, and then even more superior than any other. Noise cancellation, that used to be like, it was okay. Now it's like superior, the seat comfort, it's great. I mean, it's worth it's expensive. It's their top end product. They finally, I feel like, got it right. So yeah, it's cool. And moving on to I was just wondering, I know you've talked about autonomy, but real quick before the autonomy question, I was listening to one of your chats in the spring. I can't remember who it was with. I listened to a couple of them in the last few days, and you had mentioned, back when the stock had recently run up in the spring, it was like, I think it was around where it is now, but how like the market cap, was obviously insane, and it's hard to get excited about it. You referenced like an 800 PE at the time, but now Matt and I, they've been growing so fast, the margins. Matt and I just did an estimate yesterday of what we think the earnings are for this quarter, and it's coming in at close to 100 PE based on this quarter's earnings. If you kept that up for each quarter, if it didn't get any better, it stayed the same, which we think it'll get better. But it seems like discounting the comparison to BYD, which may seem much cheaper, obviously, in a valuation, just as a growth stock, 100 PE that's growing so fast. I mean, that seems like pretty reasonable at this point. I mean, are you still skeptical in the valuation as it used to be? Are you getting more used to it, or what do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question, and that's why I still hold it, because it's not as astronomical as it sounds. They are, everything that you just said, and as that PE lowers, then obviously more investors will be able to wrap their heads around this valuation. But I just why I'm not as excited is because it's not. I'm looking for the next 3x, 5x, 10x stock. And that's where it only has so much headroom. I just can't see it getting to. It's already the 7th most valuable company in the entire world. It's publicly traded. It's worth more than I think it's actually now all of the other auto companies, publicly traded auto companies combined. I mean that. So again, when you don't look at it that way, when you just look at it in terms of can this thing double the next year, in the next 2 years, in the next 3 years, that's more difficult. So yeah, I'm fine with where it is now, but I'm not as excited as I was in 2019, where I was, I've been waiting years and years and years, and finally it's happening, and it took off even more than I could have imagined. But I'm just not there anymore.
It's sort of taking a breather, I'd say, consolidating. Yeah, I agree. And it did go up so fast, so quick. I mean, I think the special thing about Tesla that people buy it for such a premium and hold it for such a premium is, I don't know about you, but I feel like the Elon Musk and the top engineering talent in the world kind of attracted to work at Tesla. At least that's the story we're being told, and it seems to be shown. I know you have a job tracking kind of thing, proprietary job tracking mechanism. What's your thoughts? Do you think the top engineers are coming to work at Tesla, or do you have any thoughts on that, or is it just kind of a story we're being told?
No, they most certainly are. The mistake that Ford made was that they wanted to basically have hired all these top engineers, sometimes doubled their salaries from wherever they were, but they wanted them to live in Detroit. And actually, Matt, you're in Michigan, so I'm not saying anything about Michigan, but these
no, and I know what you mean.
But these nerdier people, they actually weren't really looking for the money. They wanted to be around other, very smart engineering people. And so when they relocated to Detroit, it failed completely. So then they had to restart, and then Ford opened, and they still don't really have it. They've been pretty stubborn with this. At least GM has done this, but they have to be in Silicon Valley, because also these people jump from jobs to jobs to job, from Facebook to Google, back and forth, those all the time. Amazon, but even though Amazon's in Seattle, but still you need to be in Silicon Valley if you're going to be in the United States to really hire the top talent for really on the software side. For the more of the hardware engineering, is as Tesla moves over to Texas, specifically Austin, from what I've been told, there are a lot of people, a lot of engineers in Austin, and that's probably why Tesla wanted to move there. I mean, remember when they were going to move to like Nebraska or Oklahoma or something? I mean, that would have been
Tulsa,
so
I think.
Yeah, was it? Yeah. But no, Austin's great for that. So I think in terms of, there's definitely high turnover, but that's just true of any growing tech company. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the thing that I've heard is that in Austin, a lot of these engineers are only 1099s. They're not getting stock options. They're not given any benefits even. So they're quite temporary. I think Tesla, this is just what I've been told by an engineer who lives down there who I went to school with. And he said, I would love to work for Tesla. But it's just not there's not a lot of job security yet. Now, I'm sure as they have a factory, of course, they'll be able to offer more job security. But no, I don't think that Tesla is lacking in how they can recruit. And even in China, because we track those jobs too. No, they're hiring some of the best. But the thing is, these other companies are hiring the absolute best. That's just true of anyone trying to catch up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what about the AI bot and like future products? I mean, do you think, you got to take it seriously when Elon Musk is presenting it like that? I mean, you can't take it seriously. Okay, well,
I cannot. Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to call him on the
5 years from now.
Tesla
People are ordering and getting deliveries of these AI bots in 5 or 6 years or something.
No, but what is cool about that is that, like, if you look at, I was just talking about Beyond Meat this morning, mm-hmm. and that's a company that, all right, what's the next thing they're going to do? Or like Lululemon, what's the next thing Lululemon's going to do? All right, they're making a mirror. They're pretty much like maxing out their capabilities. Whereas Tesla and companies like BYD, companies like Xiaopeng, companies like Alibaba, Tencent, Alphabet, they even Amazon, they can expand really any direction. And so that the Tesla bot, I can't even believe I'm saying those words, but that does show that they can do a lot. And it doesn't have, I mean, geez, Tesla could even make its own like charging currency or something. Yeah. It really, especially with Elon Musk at the helm.
So you mentioned
I think that is kind of interesting.
So you don't believe in necessarily Tesla bot, the future price. So you believe, but Elon Musk, I mean, I think he's probably the top engineer of our time, smartest in many fields that he goes into. And, I'm not saying he's never wrong, but it's more, in my mind, it's more likely he's right than anyone else who disagrees with him, unless it's proven otherwise. That's how I kind of think about it. So do you think he's kind of really believes the AI bot's going to be a big product, like generational type of product that Tesla's going to bring to the market? Or do you think he kind of is skeptical himself and just kind of threw that out there as like a lure to bring more engineering, AI talent to Tesla?
It could be a ploy to get, a tactic to get more engineers interested in Tesla. But I think at this point, if engineers haven't been excited about Tesla, then they're like, they should have already been. So I don't think this was like the icing on the cake. But it really just it confused a lot of people when they came out with this robot. I do have a crazy theory. Just if I were to go full, defending Tesla and how this really is the coolest thing, and when I'm ready to come out with it, I'll share it. But it could be really smart, but even I can't. I struggle with even taking it seriously. But yeah, there is a slight possibility that this is actually very intentional. But a lot of things that Elon specifically does are just, like making his rockets phallic shaped. Like that's not a ton of engineering thought went into that decision, or even the Model X. Tesla even admits they regret ever making that vehicle. But Elon really wanted those gull-wing doors. So he's kind of whatever he says goes. But yeah, I don't think that this one has too much thought into it.
Yeah, from my point of view, it's like I'm not going to put Tesla bot in my financial model anytime soon. But to me, it kind of creates option value. Like maybe they actually have something that they can do, and it creates growth for 2025 or 2030 and beyond. But that's just I think it's kind of a binary option that I wouldn't start trying to ascribe option or value to it.
Totally.
And I think it's all based on whether or not you believe in their approach to neural networks and applying it to real world AI applications, which kind of brings us to the autonomy stuff. What are your, I guess, you don't totally believe in their autonomous approach. You think it's great level 2, I think, but you're not sure it's the vision only stack is going to be sufficient for much beyond that. Is that right, Taylor?
Yeah, that's accurate. I think that I know you guys had Chuck Cook on a few weeks ago, and I think he's very smart. He actually has the beta. He outlined it very well. I think that it's really great at what it does. The thing is, if you're saying full self-driving as trademark, capitalize proper names, then that's just like how my phone has 5G. It's not actually 5G. It's called 5G LTE. That's just the brand name that they ascribe to. So if it's full self-driving, like on city streets, because that really is the last step, the city streets. They've completed everything else. And I think the great thing is once they come out with this city streets, because that's what's in beta, then they can recognize all that deferred revenue. It's nearing $2 billion, and they'll be able to, that will be great for Tesla. But is city streets robo-taxis? That's the question, and I just don't think it is. And I think that Elon really he wanted to push that as this is to be, because when Tesla started out with this in 2014, 2015, 2016, when they really started selling cars with this hardware, I think that they really just wanted to make a fantastic car, L2 car for the highway, and that's what it does a really great job at. I mean, if I go 300 miles, I probably only have to take over maybe twice. I mean, the best that I've ever had. And at worst, I don't know, maybe 10 times. But it's actually, no, it can be higher than that. But, it is really good at highway driving and lane keeping. And other competitors have that now, maybe not as great as Tesla. But so, yeah, at L2, Tesla is great. I just don't think the master plan was with this hardware to have these be robotaxi capable. Otherwise, they would have said that when they started selling these. Something changed. And unfortunately, for Tesla, possibly, look what happened to their valuation. Right after Autonomy Day, that was the catalyst, That's when the stock really, really started to rise. And why they didn't have that messaging back then, when they really started selling the exact same hardware, I think kind of answers that, in my opinion. So no, I don't think that these are going to magically turn into robotaxis with a software update, because it's also just a lot more difficult. If I didn't know the broader autonomy space, I would think that, yeah, Tesla's the best, of course. And they're ironing the kinks out. But I've ridden in pretty much every autonomous vehicle before COVID-19. Now have come out with a lot have come out since. But having been in the other ones, those are real robotaxis. I mean, there's no driver. That's a huge difference. Look at the disengagement rate of Tesla. Even on its best drive, right around the headquarters in Palo Alto, they may be able to go, 30 miles before disengagement. But that cross-country trip that they said that they would do and everything, they're still very far away from that. And even that should be pretty easy because, again, it does really well in highway driving. And I think maybe it would be capable. There would have to be a driver because it would mess up. It would not be able to go across the country faultless. But there are, you can look up the data from the California DMV. You can download it in Excel. And there are Waymo, AutoX, Pony AI vehicles with no driver that have gone 40,000 miles and 0 disengagements. So Tesla's just nowhere close to that. And it's not like they're going to just magically creep up on that because they have a massive fleet of vehicles out there. That's another, argument that I hear a lot of Tesla Super Bowls making, and that's not how we're. You can ask any engineer or other competitor, and of course, they may be biased, but that's just not how theirs work. There are actually robo taxis in cities, mostly in China, and now California just granted 2 more licenses. But how is that possible? That they have a lot more sensors. They've been doing it the right way, with the right approach. But also, I don't think that Tesla really, if they're going to make robo taxis, ones that no driver at all, no steering wheel, then they shouldn't. They want to own those. And as an investor in Tesla, I want them to own those vehicles. I don't want those to be owned by you and I, right? I want Tesla to maintain that fleet.
Well, I think they had the Model 3 leasing option was like, Tesla has the right to not let you buy it out at the end or something, right? So yeah, I think they want to reserve that. And Tesla's approach is very different, as you know, to the other, so-called robo-taxi people right now that have all the other sensors. They're very micro, mapped, geo-fenced specific planned routes. They can do the robo-taxi in like a city in Arizona or whatever, or specific routes in San Francisco. So it's a very different, I think, philosophy from what Tesla's doing. It's just a matter or not of whether you believe in Tesla's vision-only neural network. I think capacity can accomplish the full self-driving task or not, and it seems like you clearly don't.
No, I mean, even the onboard compute is just not powerful enough. So
yeah,
we know that the current hardware they can't do it, but also, I mean, we know that there's inherent blind spots. Chuck Cook is really great at demonstrating those. And what would happen if you had more cameras? I am a strong believer in LiDAR. Fundamentally, I think that I'd rather have more sensors on my car. I don't care if they look ugly, than fewer sensors on my car. Yeah. And I get that sensor fusion is very difficult for Tesla with its current compute power, but it's also the geofence argument is one that I hear a lot of Tesla bulls make that don't really know what they're talking about because they just throw it out there like geofence. I mean, some people even say LiDAR is geofence. LiDAR is a sensor. It's not geofence. Yeah. And also, Tesla, of course, uses for ground truths. It uses LiDAR. But without getting into the whole vision versus LiDAR argument, it's the point is that there are companies that were established after Tesla started selling what it calls full self-driving capable vehicles that now have driverless cars in cities that are, spaces that are 3 times the size of Miami. I mean, clearly they're beating Tesla, and I see them scaling a lot faster than I see Tesla that can't even go in a parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, I would disagree with it because I just believe in their philosophy of the vision only. I mean, I think they have enough insight, and I trust Elon and Andre enough that they're doing the right things, pulling radar. I mean, it seems like the opposite of what you'd want. Like you said, it seems like you'd want more sensors, but it seems like they figured something out that just causes extra noise and problems in their compute and decision making. And so I think, I just trust the way they're going. I don't think they're kind of leading themselves into a bad direction. I think that they think they've figured it out, and I'm uncertain, but I think they have their philosophy is most likely to succeed. But that's just, we can differ on that. But, a lot of people think the way you do, and a lot of Tesla bulls believe in Tesla's kind of philosophy and approach.
But it's not very meaty, in my opinion, the argument that you're making. It's just, I believe in Andre and I believe in Elon because Elon can land rockets on drone ships. He can do anything. I just think that it's a little shallow of an argument because they're not doing it, right? They're not successful. They're always late at full self-driving. And the product that they have right now, even in beta, is just pathetic compared to cars that actually drive themselves. So I don't know.
I mean, you saw the car dropped in Ukraine. Did you see the hackers that kind of hacked into it? And it was driving very well, like no other self-driving. That's the difference in philosophy, right? Tesla can do that. No other self-driving car company can really do that. And so it's a very different approach, different technology. The neural network, starting from the image net to what they're doing now. Like we use eyes. We use our eye. We use 2 eyes. They have 8 eyes, and they're just perfecting that with the neural network to be like much better than human eyes and vision. I think that's how I see it.
we also don't drive with lasers sticking out of our heads. But that's I'd rather have a lot more sensors. Anyway,
you believe in the sensor approach. I understand.
So
and also sensor fusion, which Tesla can't.
It sounds nice, but I think it causes extra noise. But we can differ on that. Like we differ. I'm
Well,
not saying I just believe in Elon. They've explained their way. I believe it.
The other companies are actually doing it, and they scale by city because really for regulatory purposes. But yes, for a lot of these, they do rely on HD maps that, for example, Zoox, they say it takes them 2 to 3 days to HD map an entire city. And then to update them.
But when there's a construction zone, it throws them off, and someone has to take over. That's not practical. Come on.
Well, no, that's not how. I mean, you can see them operate. Look at a video of any of these. Of course, they can operate around cones. I mean, it's not like cones are just suddenly an issue for them.
It's very difficult. Anything unexpected is very hard for their.
Well, no, that's actually not true. Because they are operating around construction all over, and you don't need to remap that area just because there's construction. When you use HD maps, it's really for localization within where you are in the space, but it's also so that you know that this stoplight, we shouldn't be looking at this stoplight. That's cross traffic, or we know that there's going to be a stop sign, even if it's covered by a tree, or even if it fell down last night. I mean, that's really what HD maps are for. But you could plop one of these autonomous vehicles anywhere, and they would probably just go in a straight line, but they can maneuver around objects because they have all these sensors. They have all the sensors that Tesla has, plus a lot more. So now it is a quite weak argument just from how these vehicles are being deployed in cities. They're being deployed in many cities at a time, and there are hundreds of them. Sure, there are not 2 million of them like there are Teslas, but again, these cars actually drive themselves. Tesla can't even do it for a demonstration. You have to have that driver right there ready to take over. So that's why if Tesla's going to...
I don't know about you, I've seen it demonstrated all over YouTube by all the beta testers, though. I mean, Holmars, he does tons of drives where there's no interventions all over cities. I think it's here. I think maybe, folks in your camp are missing the boat here, and it's right in front of our eyes, and it's just... Maybe a year from now, it's going to be a non-argument anymore, and people will just say, hands down, Tesla's won.
I think there's maybe a distinction that could maybe be a little bit more meatier from your perspective, Taylor, of why would Tesla choose fewer sensors and not go for radar fusion. I think the thing to keep in mind is that they're trying to have a general purpose technology that can kind of handle any situation and intuit around it. So there's this quote from, I think it was a Q4 2017 earnings call that I just really stuck out with me, and I wanted to read it because I think a lot of people are maybe not familiar with this quote, and I think it kind of gets to the meat of this question. So Elon says, "I think it's pretty obvious that the road system is geared toward passive optical. We have to solve passive optical image recognition extremely well in order to be able to drive in any given environment and the changing environment. We must solve passive optical image recognition. We must solve it extremely well." It's a nice Elonism there. And then he says, "At the point at which you have solved it extremely well, what is the point in having active optical, meaning LiDAR, which does not read signs? It's just giving you, in my mind, a crutch that will drive companies to a local maximum that they will find very difficult to get out of. If you take the hard path of a sophisticated neural net that's capable of advanced image recognition, then I think you achieve the goal maximum." So that goal maximum being, driving in any situation, anywhere. So, what do you take of that specific, view that Elon has, that you have to have very sophisticated image recognition neural nets, and maybe you need hardware 4. Let's maybe put hardware 3, hardware 4, discussion behind us for the moment, but just of the overall approach of that vision and neural nets versus LiDAR. Because to me, it does make sense that, if you can solve vision extremely well, then you probably don't need the other stuff.
So you're familiar with what a ground truth is, right?
Yep.
So what Tesla's doing, I mean, there's the LiDAR company that Tesla actually uses for these ground truths. Their slogan is, "We take the guesswork out of autonomy." With vision, you're only seeing in 2 dimensions. You can try to simulate 3-dimensionally, but images are only in 2D. So with LiDAR and millimeter wave radar...
Well, I think with vision, they combine the time right, to make it a 3D interpretation, right?
It's
That's
an
how they can do
interpretation.
it.
It's a guess, right? So they're trying to guess, and you can even see it in, all of us have Teslas. When you get to an intersection and you move the around the intersection on the screen, it doesn't actually know where the stoplights are. It's guessing. Whereas LiDAR, it knows exactly where it is, and it can actually determine the angle. Now, can LiDAR see the color of the light? No, that's why you need cameras. That's why you need a combination.
But in a sense, that's what our eyes are doing. They're just guessing just based on time and motion, and that's sort of, I think, what
we see
image
three-dimensionally, right?
we put the 3 dimensions together based on the movement of time. If I just take a quick snapshot and, snap my eyes, I'm seeing a 2-dimensional picture. It's the time that makes us see 3-dimensional. And I think that's what they're trying to replicate with the vision only approach with video. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, it makes sense of what Tesla set out to do 6 years ago and what it's now trying to claim that it still can do with its current hardware. The thing is, back then, LiDAR cost $35,000 a unit when Tesla set out on this. They didn't know. Elon couldn't have guessed. No one could have foreseen that it would come down to now below $500 a unit. That is crazy. I mean, there should be a documentary, a book written about that, and there probably will be. But that's something that they didn't have at the time, or for a car for the masses, that was not obviously doable at the time. So I think that, of course, Elon has to stick with what he said. But again, there are cars that actually can drive themselves, and they also use cameras. Like cameras, that's the basis, and then everything else is just making sure it's incredibly accurate. So yeah, it's working for others. It's not working for Tesla. It hasn't worked for Tesla in the past. I don't see how it magically will, but maybe in 6 years it will. But maybe they should upgrade the cameras. Maybe they should add more of them. I'm not saying it's just a LiDAR thing or just a millimeter wave radar thing. There can be different approaches, but I'm just saying right now, especially as an investor, I have identified the winners because they can actually drive themselves autonomously. Even if it's just around a course with cones, that's better than what Tesla's doing right now. Actually, Tesla can probably navigate pretty well around cones, but no, Tesla's not a winner right now, and I don't see them being a winner unless they really upgrade their hardware.
Okay. Well, we can agree.
That approach is actually fantastic.
Yeah, well, we can agree to differentiate on that. Yes. That's fine. I mean, there's a lot of things we do agree on, and time will tell, whether Tesla's approach is the right approach or not, I guess. So we'll see. But that's interesting. I mean, I think, it's interesting that you're still owned a stock, even though you're super skeptical of their autonomous driving approach.
The autonomy, I always tell people I'm skeptical of two things with Tesla. And that is where it currently is with 4680 development and where it is its approach to autonomy. And other than that, I see Tesla as a phenomenal company for all the same reasons all of us do. And so, also that's why, especially on Twitter, my voice is definitely geared more towards those two things, because people aren't talking about that enough. And I think that's really important. And again, I want Tesla to do very well. And Tesla is improving people's lives. So I just think that no one else is really saying this, so I tend to
help
share.
You to be skeptical. Yeah.
And also, people say I don't post enough bullish things for years. I mean, ask any of my friends; they're like, "You would not shut up about Tesla." But I don't need to remind people that EVs are so great because they're so safe and they have a front trunk and which acts as a crumple. I don't need to say that stuff anymore. People understand that. You can find that anywhere. So I try to offer maybe some alternative perspectives for sure.
Yeah, that's much appreciated. Although I do think the broader population still doesn't really know very much about EVs in general or Teslas in specific. So there is a huge amount, I think, of education to be done, but probably not we probably don't need to educate the people who are following the three of us on Twitter, because exactly. Those are going to be Tesla enthusiasts or EV enthusiasts in general already. So you don't need to talk about frunks and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Well, Taylor, I appreciate all the time you've given us. It's been a really insightful conversation, and I just really appreciate your time and wish you all the best in the move to Shenzhen.
Thank you.
Appreciate your.
When are you moving there?
Well, the Olympics are kind of taking up
priority for all these work visas and everything. And then there's also the 3-week quarantine. So that's not super great right now. I mean, you literally cannot leave your hotel room.
And they'll track you on your phone, right?
What?
And I believe they track your phone to make sure you haven't actually physically left the premises.
Yeah, I'm sure they use that as well, but they also just tape the door.
Okay, that'll do it. Low tech will work sometimes.
Yeah, like a penny on the door kind of thing. But no, so that's kind of holding us off. But also the boosters is going to be a big question mark, because can you mix? Can I get the Sinovac? I have Moderna, but so those types of things there. If COVID didn't exist, then we would be there 2 months ago. But we're only moving there for like 2 to 3 years. So then we're coming back. I want to raise my kids in the U.S. and everything. But no, and we'll be back and forth all the time. And we'll always have an office out there. But yeah, you guys.
Does China give you kind of any incentives to move over there or relocate there or anything? Or is it just kind of like they're open to it? You just have to follow their kind of guidelines and such?
Yeah, no, there are no incentives, which I'm fine with.
Yeah. I was thinking that maybe they would try to incentivize Elon more in time to relocate more there,
I was thinking that he should actually get an apartment in China. I mean, what would that do? If you have Elon walking around in China, people would buy those cars so fast. They love him. They obsess over him. So no, I think he needs an apartment there. And just go over there like once a year and just like walk around and go to give a bunch of talks. I mean, he could also recruit a lot more people that way.
Yeah, and he's mentioned the future, head of Tesla might be from China. He's referenced that a couple times on occasion. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if one day, he's splitting more time in China over time.
Yeah,
at some point. Cool. It's been a great pleasure having you on, Taylor. And yeah, we'll have to stay in touch and maybe have you on in a year once Tesla's solved the full self-driving, or not.
I'll come on.
Yeah, we'll have you on again.
Thanks so much, guys. This is fun.
All right.
Thank you. 再见.
All right.
再见.